You are significant. You have seeds of greatness inside of you. You are not on accident. You are on purpose. You are here for a very divine, special purpose. And we are going to talk in this podcast about evidence that you are significant. So, welcome, Jessica Phillips, to You Are Significant. So excited to have you with us today. And Jessica and I met when we were at a mutual women's event for entrepreneurs. And I'm so thankful that we got a chance to meet and get to know each other. There was about 30, 40 women at that. We all stayed
Yeah,
in this
yeah,
huge house. And our really good friend, Brooke Hemingway, brought us together at this gorgeous location, Mount Zion.
yes.
And I just never could have imagined how just like magical and majestic it was going to be. They had like 1,000-year snow while we were there together, right, Jessica?
Yes, yes.
Woke up the first morning after we got there, and it was like 6 inches of snow in March at Mount Zion.
It was beautiful. It was beautiful.
So pretty. So, as time has passed, then you've done a mastermind with Brooke, and I
Yep.
have done a mastermind with Brooke. I was in a mastermind last year. So, we have that in common as well. And we do Plexus together. And so, lots of things. And you have a wellness center, right?
I do. Yep.
And
Yep. I just purchased that about a year ago.
oh, okay. So that's a fairly new venture
Yes.
then. How exciting.
Fairly new, but also not. And I'm sure we'll touch on that
Yeah.
as we go here today.
Yes. Yes. So wanted to just kind of back up and start with your story of like your childhood and what it was like growing up.
Sure. So I am from upstate New York, pretty a rural area, and I am the youngest of five. My by 7 years. So I have a half sister who is the oldest, and then there were four of us from my with my father and my mother together. And I was the youngest. The other three were very close in age. They were like a year and a half, 2 years apart. So they came very quick. And then 7 years later, I came. So, and that's a
So you're the
pretty,
baby, huh?
I am the baby. I
Oh.
am. And it plays a little bit of significance into my story because um, I was unexpected. And so, life was happening. There was some normalcy going on. And then, of course, I came. My father was a entrepreneur. We come from a family of entrepreneurs. Um, he had a auto recycling business, which my grandfather actually started as a gas station. And so he worked there as a child, and then they grew it into this very lucrative auto recycling center. And my dad was just the type of person who was always starting businesses. So that was his mainstay. So um, it was we had a beautiful home, and we raised horses. We showed horses, and I was involved at that with that from a very young age. So, on all things considered, it was beautiful. It was a great place to grow up. Uh, However, I definitely always felt um, a lack of worth for sure. Yeah.
So what contributed to that? Just because you were the baby and it come later, did your parents talk to you about in terms of that or what created that?
Um, I think it was a host of things. I was born into a family. I think that there's always one person who is the first to jump out the window and change things.
Mm,
And I feel like I knew at a very young age, I felt God's calling on my life, and and I just knew that I was different. That was going to be me. So there were just some healing that needed to happen, from the way that I think my father was raised by a really um, hard grandfather.
mhm,
And my mother lost her father shortly after I was born to alcoholism. So there was just some healing from their childhoods that were brought into their marriage and raising their kids. And so there was a lot of double standards in the home, and that confused me. I'm a very empathetic, people pleasing person.
mhm,
And so that was, I learned at a very young age to read the energy in the room and adjust mine to be appropriate, to not rock the boat.
mm,
And so because of that, um, when that happens to a child, the child doesn't develop a sense of self.
mm,
You're always, because you're always adjusting to the energy,
mhm,
and it was never constant. And at that, when my father was younger and raising kids, he was a very hard to please man, very hard
mhm,
man himself, and just very driven and expected a lot. Very hard to meet the expectations. So I think that's probably where it came from.
mm,
Primarily was
mhm.
just the environment.
Yeah, was your father older? Had he been in any of like the wars or any of that kind of thing?
So the other situation for my dad is he was born with his fingers webbed together, fingers and
Mhm.
his toes. And so most of his fingers were only to the first knuckle.
Okay.
And and I think that played a part in him wanting us to, the way he drove us so hard, because he didn't want us to, I think he probably got ridiculed and picked on, but he wasn't able to go to war. He tried to, but he couldn't because of his hands and his toes. Now, mind you, the man, you would never know unless he, obviously, it was a physical thing you could see, but it didn't hold him back from doing anything. Nothing. There was
Mhm.
nothing he couldn't do, except wear flip flops and have button fly jeans.
Yeah. Right. So it's so interesting how what our
Yeah.
parents went through, their experiences really does have so much to do with us and what shapes
Hmm.
us and how our childhood was and that inner child, and then how that translates into adulthood. So, my I have immigrants in my background. My mom's mother's father and mom were from Sweden. They came over here when the U.S. was giving away farms, and
Uh,
he was a dairy farmer. He acquired a dairy farm. So I mean, even though saying it sounds far removed, like that was my great grandfather, but it doesn't feel that way to me because my grandmother was very strict. I mean,
hmm.
I lived with them in college for a few months, and she wanted me to make my bed. And I wasn't a bed maker. It wasn't required in my home growing up. And I wasn't a slob in my room, but it, going to class and working 3 jobs as a college student, paying my way through college, even though my grandparents let me live with them, and that was a blessing. There wasn't a lot of time. And
Sure.
one time I come home and I had woke up late, so I ran to class, and my bed was made, and she left a note on my bed that said, "You have to sleep on the floor tonight because you didn't make your bed." And
Oh,
she had made a pallet in the living room for me to sleep on instead as my punishment as a college student. And so,
hmm.
that kind of harshness,
Yep.
to her, it was just being a good parent, being a good even grandparent. And but on my side of it, it was like, wow, this is extreme, kind
Yeah.
of behavior and no
Mhm.
grace, no conversation like, what happened this morning? I really wanted you to make your bed. None of that. It was just a note and the palette.
Mm. Wow.
Because again, I was working 3 jobs, so I'm getting home late. I'm leaving early,
Sure.
home late. And so those kind of experiences that our grandparents and our parents came from colored our childhoods and
Yes, very
yeah.
much so. Very much so. And, you know, like we mentioned grace, we were raised in the church. We knew about grace and we went every Sunday. My parents were, on the board and very involved. And like, I think that goes back to, like I said, the double standards as someone who's very in tune with emotion and energy and things of that nature when it's
Mhm.
confusing. It's very confusing. And it's hard to develop, yeah, just a level of trust at that point,
Mhm.
Yeah.
Right, when you see the inconsistencies of, like, um, learning about love, for example, and how
Mhm.
love when you read 1 Corinthians 13, it does all these things, and, it's and that without love, basically, we're nothing is what the
Mhm.
passage says, and then you come home, and then it's like, "Wait, what about that love thing?"
Yes. Yes. Yes.
So,
Exactly.
moving forward
Exactly.
just a little bit, talk about, like, your school days and even
Sure.
teenage moving into teenage years and those kind of things.
Sure. I loved school. I was the social butterfly. I talked to everyone. Wasn't really part of any clique because everyone was my friend. I loved school, and I think it was my safe place, as well, to get out of the house and, just kind of establish my own self, to a degree.
Mhm,
And so I absolutely loved it. The only hard thing for me was that I was heavier.
mhm,
And so um, that's always hard. Body shaming isn't anything new. It's been
mhm,
around forever.
mhm.
And so that was hard. But aside from that, I absolutely loved it. We, uh, you know, Elementary school was amazing. I absolutely had a great time, and then, moving into so we lived, rurally, like I said. So when I was in kindergarten, I had to take 3 different buses to get to to the school,
Wow.
and so, where I lived, we were spread out, but there were, several neighbors that had kids my age, and we would snowmobile to each other's homes, and we were always riding horses all over the countryside, and that's just kind of the way it was. And then high school as well. I was on the swim team and the tennis club and in band and in choir. I met my husband in high school. It was school was good. I yeah, I it was
Fun.
yeah.
Is that where you met your husband?
Yes, yes, yes. I actually just told this story the other night. Yes, I was he was a year older than me. I was in English class. I was in 10th grade, and my girlfriend said, I want you to give somebody this note because I really like this guy. Will you I'll show you who he is. Will you give it to him?" I'm like, "Oh, sure." Had never seen, my husband before, so she pointed to him, and I tapped him on his back, and I told him, "This is from Patty," and I left. I walked away, and a couple days later, I was at my locker, and I went to shut it, and he was standing right there, and I thought, "Oh, this is gonna get me in a lot of trouble." I'm definitely losing a friend over this. And I did. I did. But it was worth it. I gained a whole lot more.
So how many years have y'all been married?
So we have been married. This August will be our 29th year, but we've been
Awesome.
together for, gosh, 35, or more years. We dated all through high school, and then he went into the Navy for 4 years. And that's another part of the story,
Well,
which I'd be glad to share.
feel free to share.
Sure. So as I grew up, I did have a couple situations that really, really did affect. Again, I always felt like God set me apart. I didn't understand it, but I always had a real personal relationship with the Lord. Um, my grandpa and my step grandmother actually led me to Christ down here in Florida. I'm down here visiting my mom down here. I think it was probably Easter Sunday service or something at a very young
Oh,
age. It's just a core memory that I have.
mhm,
But I always felt him, internally. I just felt he was with me. But I did have a situation where I had a cousin who was sexually abusing me at a younger age, and I was going to say something, and he burnt me with the
mhm,
water heater and gave me a third-degree burn on my leg. And that really, I think I was probably somewhere between 7 and 10 at that point, probably
mhm,
maybe, yeah. And so that really affected the way I saw my worth as far as a woman
mm,
goes. And so, that led me to believe that if I didn't do what I was told to do by man, I was gonna get hurt.
mm,
Logical for a young girl to think
mhm.
that. Um,
Yes.
and so um, there's a couple other instances in my life where that situation kind of happened to me. And so when I met, my husband, and he's just such an amazing man, and he told me from the get-go that he was gonna go into the Navy. His father was in the Navy, his brother wasn't gonna do it, so he felt obligated to carry on that, you know, legacy.
Mhm,
And I was like, "Okay," didn't think anything of it. I was in 10th grade. And the closer it got to that point, I thought, "There is no way he's leaving me. There is no way he's leaving me."
mhm, mhm,
But, sure enough, he did, and I completely fell apart because he was my rock. He was just my rock. So he left the summer before my senior year, and, um, at that point, I started to get into drugs, alcohol. I was just medicating, and I had never learned how to, deal with my emotions because we were never allowed to have them.
mm,
It was like I said, I always put a lid on myself to prevent, an argument or get in trouble or, things like that. So we were never taught how to process our emotions.
mm,
Um, so when he left, I fell apart. We stayed together for the first year that he was gone, and then it's hard. We didn't have cell phones.
mhm,
It was like if I'm home and I caught his call, it
mm,
was just very difficult. So, um, and then from there, I ended up I went to, graduated, and then I went to school to become a hairdresser locally. And I wanted to go to London to do that because that was the hub of everything. I was told I couldn't. And now looking back, I was 18. I very well could have, but
mhm,
again, didn't want to rock the boat, didn't want to make anybody unhappy. And I didn't have the confidence. I just hadn't developed myself enough to say, I'm going to do this. So
mhm,
I went locally and I met a girl that I became friends with, and I started to date her brother. Um, and I didn't know it when I started to date him, but he was a cocaine user.
mm,
And so that led me down a path of becoming a very addicted to crack cocaine.
mm,
And then Chad came home, my husband came home. We broke up, but I was still in a very addictive phase. It was about 3.5 years of that.
mhm,
And it was not a good time in my life. I was stealing from money from my parents. I was selling things to get the money. It's a bad, bad, bad road you go down. Um, all the while, just I was broken. I didn't know who I was. I'd never established, um, you know, I just never was able to establish that. So
Mhm.
my husband came home from the Navy, and we started getting together again, and not really seriously, but enough to where I found myself pregnant.
Mhm.
And he said, you got to get help. So I went to rehab, and that was it for me. I was completely done. I remember screaming into my pillow when I checked into the center, just crying out to God, you got to fix this. You have got to help me, because when you're in an addictive in the middle of an addiction, you just cannot see the light at the end of the tunnel. You
Mm-mm.
cannot see that. And it's even harder when you don't feel worthy. You
Mhm.
don't know who you are. You don't know, you just don't feel valued or seen or heard. And, but you love so deeply. I've always loved people so deeply. And so it was always so hurtful when I always felt like I was falling short of my purpose because it wasn't received.
Mm.
Um, so it was a dark, dark time, but God showed up in big, big ways, big ways. I never had any withdrawal.
Wow.
I never craved any of that again. And I have to say, I don't know, if this is normal or not, but I didn't want to, it wasn't something I wanted to be doing. I don't think anybody wants to be in the middle of an addiction, but um, I just wanted to escape. I just didn't want to feel the hurt that I felt and the
Mhm.
shame that I felt and the guilt. I just didn't want to feel that. So, so anyway, we had our first daughter, our beautiful daughter, Victoria, and went on to have two more beautiful children. We've got two girls and a boy, and we made it work. We were not intending to. It wasn't like we were head over heels in love again already, right off the bat. But we here we are, going on
Mhm.
29 years, more in
Wow.
love than ever, more in love than ever, for sure.
What do you think helped you so much in rehab? Did you have like an experience? One, like some people have an experience where God just
Mm.
they have like a God experience, or was it someone God worked through there, like a really fabulous counselor? Can you share a little bit more about that?
Sure. So, like I said, I was raised in a Christian home, and in that environment, anything that had to do with meditation or yoga or any of that stuff was like, oh, that's woo witchy stuff. Don't get involved in that. But I was always drawn to it. I was always drawn to that peace that
Mhm.
that people who were practicing those things had. And so in rehab, a couple things happened. One, I was scared to death and didn't know, do I keep this child or not keep that? Like, what do I do here? And my pastor, was the pastor at the time, the most gentle, beautiful woman. She would drive, the rehab center was about an hour and a half away from my home and where she lived. And she drove up 3 or 4 different times just to be with me and talk with me. And, when my parents actually had started to winter in Florida at that point, so they didn't even come back
Wow.
for like 2 or 3 weeks.
Mhm.
They just were like, get help or get out, which to their to their credit, that was probably the best thing they could have done, because they may not have done it had they not done that. But that was
Mhm.
hard. It was like, oh,
A lot of
um,
times in a rehab situation, the patient and the family have to be separated for a while. It's part of the healing
yeah.
journey. It's
Hmm.
pretty normal. So yeah, so, and I think that's important to say here because people who haven't been through that may feel like that was neglect, and it really isn't. It's so
Mhm.
important in recovery for the person to be like, you got to come to yourself.
Yes.
You have to face yourself,
You
and
need the space.
you need that space, yes, to just come to yourself.
Mhm. Yeah, and so while I was there, a few different things that I've carried with me, um, since then. One was we had meditation. There was all different elements that they would provide for us that we could choose to do throughout the day, um, for healing. And obviously to hit all the different points where people might relate and to. And so I would go and we did our, we would there was guided meditation where we would just lay, on our mats, and there's guided meditations, and it was so powerful to me. I don't remember the exact meditation, but it just allowed me to feel for the first time in a very, very long time, since I was a child, really, to really, really feel, and um, kind of my heart kind of started to open up. We would do art, to this like beautiful meditation, piano type music. We would read poetry, and it was all those things that I really wasn't allowed to experience, that helped me to heal. Oh, there was one poem that I still have. I still have a few things from those days in my like important file
Mhm.
in my office, and one of them was about, I walked down the street and I fell in a hole. The next day, I walk down the street, I see the hole, and I fall in the hole. The next day, I walk down the street and I see the hole and I walk around the hole. The next day, I walk down a different street. And it was like, I'm
Yes,
sure you've heard that
I've
before, and it's
heard that. I'm glad
just
you reminded us of that.
mhm.
That's so
And
powerful.
that was very powerful for me, and so there was a few different exercises like that, and we would have to journal about that, and it would trigger different things because there was always this one spot that I had to drive past, and I knew if I drove past that exit, and continued on to my friend's house, I'd be fine. If I got off that exit, I was gonna find myself getting the cocaine and using. So
Mm,
it just was a good visual for me,
yes.
and, just that, "Oh my gosh, I have a choice." I
Mm,
didn't grow up having choices. I
mm,
did not grow up having choices. It was, um, do as I say, not as I do, and just basically do as I say.
mhm.
That you
Right.
know, and be happy about it. Don't complain, and if you can, be just don't talk either. Like, you know, just,
Okay.
so I just realized that I have a choice here. I have a choice to, um, be somebody different.
Mhm,
I have a choice to be myself, whoever
mhm,
that is. I have a choice here to find that person.
mhm.
Um, and so after our rehab, my mom, my mom came with her girlfriend to pick me up. She was like a second mother to me, so I was okay with that, but it was still kind of like weird that she wouldn't come to get me by myself. Um, uh, I had my first ultrasound at a hospital while I was in rehab. I had to go by myself. The rehab driver took me, dropped me off. I had to go into this environment, and it was hard. It was hard and scary, and I was so alone. But anyway, I got home and she said, "You're going to go stay with your sister Lori." Now, my sister Lori is my guardian angel. She is 9 years older than me, but she is my wingman and has always been. Sorry.
No, that's okay. Emotion is good.
And her husband actually, when they found out I was going into rehab, he said, "Jesse needs to come stay with us." So my sister Lori went to college and never came home, never came back. Because she would have died in that environment. She really would have. It wasn't a place for people to flourish. Her home
Mhm.
really wasn't. So she went to college and she never came back, and she knew I needed to get out of there. So I
Mhm.
went and lived with them for the majority of my pregnancy. And my husband would drive down and see me. And at one point we finally decided, okay, we're going to make a go of this because we weren't sure what we were going to do. Are we going to stay together? You know, what are we going to do?
Mhm.
And so at one point we were like, okay, we're going to do this. So then I moved home and we moved in together, and that was also a really big no-no. Not only was I pregnant outside of wedlock, but I was out of wedlock.
Mhm.
So my father basically said, you know, you will do right by her and you will marry her. And
Mhm.
so that's why we got married. Neither one of us wanted to, but but yeah, so I went and stayed with my sister Lori. It was such a great thing. And to your point, Darlene, you have to be separate. You have to leave the environment. You
Yes.
you have to get out of the environment
Mhm.
and it be exposed to new things. And so what I had to do down there was I had to go to outpatient therapy, and I had to go to a certain amount of meetings.
Mhm.
Um, and I met the most earthy, wonderful people down there where she lived, because she lived 3 hours. She lived in a different state than we did.
Okay.
So she lived in Pennsylvania and we were in New York. So I was 3.5 hours away from home, and it was good. It was completely different
Yeah.
environment.
Pennsylvania is more like farm country, and
Yeah,
which you were still out in the rural part of New York, you said already. You weren't in what a lot of us think of New York City, and you were
right.
in the rural
Or
part with horses and
yeah,
taking three
yeah,
buses to get to school and all that. So
yeah,
how was Pennsylvania different and healing for you?
yeah. So she, well, one, just being with my sister.
Mm,
She was one person who she knew me
mm,
through and through, and I could be myself. She's
yeah.
the one person in the family that just loved me to pieces. I was like her baby. Like I said, she was 9 when I was born, so she was like my mama.
Mm,
Um, and we and she had 2 kids, and I love kids. And so I was able to be her babysitter and be with my niece and nephew, and
mhm,
um, it was just such a good, sweet time, such a good,
mhm.
sweet time. And like I said, I had met some wonderful people through the meetings, and I had a great therapist, and I needed that. And it was something that was frowned upon, still frowned upon, you know, in my family. And he was really, really powerful and impactful. And one of the things he told me was, you know, if you're rooted, it doesn't matter where you go and where you end up being planted, but if you are rooted in your faith and you know who you are, you
Mhm.
can go anywhere. It won't matter where God takes you.
Yes.
You can be anywhere and you'll still be rooted, because I had a fear of I just had a lot of fear. I think going through those situations, you have a lot of fear and you just don't trust yourself. You don't have you don't trust your intuition. And so he was a great therapist. I did end up moving back to my hometown, and I tried very, very hard in the only way I knew possible to continue on my healing journey and stay part of the family. Um, and I didn't do it perfectly. I I more just tried to stay away from him, and that was confusing to them. They just didn't. They just didn't. People who aren't growing don't understand the person that is, and
Mm,
they often find it
it's profound.
insulting. You
Insult.
know.
Mm,
Hmm.
mhm.
And so, um, you know, some of the years were hard.
It's
So
almost
that
like this idea of we're not good enough for you.
yes.
That's why you're trying to be more, is because they make it about them. We're not good enough for you. This, I don't know if your family did this, but it
Mhm.
does, it happens when you're
Yeah.
growing, a person is growing, and their family or their friends or the people they grew up around are not. And I
Mhm.
think at being in business, that can be difficult, being in network marketing, where we go to our friends and our family first a lot of times, and that's what we're taught to do. And then we go to them and we're even harshly rejected because they're afraid of, they don't understand what we're doing. And then
Yeah.
there's fear in them that if they encourage us at all, that it's going to make it worse and they're going to be losing us. And somehow that's going to cast judgment back on them that they didn't grow. And so it's just like this almost sick cycle of things that we have to decide, are we going to break free from that and accept and still love them in that state, but still
Right.
love ourselves and our dream and our vision enough to move towards significance and move
Yeah.
towards calling on our life that God has.
Mhm.
It's really a seed that God puts inside of us that cannot be ignored. And it creates this drive and this hunger and passion and love that maybe our family or our friends just can't understand.
Mhm.
It
Mhm.
feels like rejection or judgment on them when really it has nothing to do with them. It's all about accepting what God has shown us and the gifts that He's given us to use and to put into practice and to share so that we can
Mhm.
live into that calling. Do you relate to that?
I do so much, and I found myself, from the time that Chad and I got married and we're raising our family, and I fought so hard to do things differently,
Mhm.
and and it was met with such resistance,
Mhm.
such resistance, and when you at that time, I didn't understand how to heal the inner child. I didn't understand what triggers were. Um, I didn't understand. I didn't. Nobody was really talking about that in my world,
Mhm.
and so you know, I would get triggered, and then I would I would try and set a boundary, and I would get triggered, and then I would lash out, and it was a lot of years of push and pull, push and pull, push and pull, but I knew in the depths of my soul
Mhm.
that I that it was okay, that it was
It's
okay for
okay.
me to want different, and
And that's such
I
a powerful phrase to learn,
Mhm,
to say it's okay. What
mhm,
I'm learning in the neurological training I'm in is that phrase, it's okay. It gets down into your nervous system. It's like a phrase because the nervous system has so much to do with whether I'm taking action or I'm not as a human
yeah. Oh,
towards
yes.
my vision, towards my purpose, towards my significance. And so learning that phrase, it's okay, has been that's it's powerful.
The other phrase I've learned that I use a lot is when well, there's two things that I'll share.
Mhm.
One is when I am triggered or my nervous system, you can feel it's just out of check and just like blah inside.
Mhm.
Those days when you want to crawl out of your own skin, you just can't get settled. I say, "What do you need, sweetheart?" And that's a Tiffany
Mhm.
Peterson
I love that.
verbiage.
Mhm.
"What do you need, sweetheart?" And I just sit with myself. But for so many years, Darlene, I was scared to sit with myself. It was hard. I have more journals and crying out to the Lord and, why am I like this and how do I fix it? And feeling like I'm changing and I think it's good, but then they think it's bad. So maybe I'm bad, back and forth and back and forth. And I spent a lot of years, probably 15, 20 years of our first married life in that spot,
Mhm.
trying to change, but feeling like I was bad because I was trying to change.
Mm.
Um, and then I just kept pouring into my faith and getting closer and closer to the Lord, and He would bring things to me. My very first event I ever went to was called She Speaks, and Lisa Turquist put it on with some other people who used to do the uh, Women of Faith events. I don't know if you ever went to any of the Women of Faith events.
No, it sounds
Um,
wonderful.
Oh my goodness. All these powerful Christian women who come in and they pour into you through skits and storytelling and singing and just telling their story. And I went to 3 or 4 of those, but then I got in the room with some people the She Speaks event was for people who were looking to be bloggers, write a book, or speaking on stage. I just knew I needed to get into the room, and it was wonderful, but that was the first time I did something like that for myself, went all alone.
I'm
Um
imagining that would be so healing for you finding your voice
Mhm,
because
mhm.
from what you were saying earlier, it was like you weren't allowed to feel. And if you can just not say anything, that's even better.
Yep.
And
Mhm.
so the transition of healing, a lot of healing was finding your voice too.
Yes, and it still is. It still is. That's my biggest, um, probably, stumbling block along the way is standing in my power
Mm,
and using my voice. So, when you talk about where was God in all this, it was like when you look back and you see all these blessings and all these things he laid in your path, and not just the things he laid in the path, but the strength that he gave you to say
mm.
yes. When you are,
God gave you the strength to say
yeah,
yes to the things
just
you needed to say yes to.
mhm, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and so I went through a lot of therapy and did all the things, and
Did your rehab do 12-step therapy, 12 steps, or no?
yeah, they did, yeah, and
Okay.
of course, at the meetings,
Mhm.
I only went to a few. I really um, love what it does for people, but I just wanted to be with my Lord.
Mhm.
I have to say, my and I want to say this in the right way. I think my addiction was more. I was more addicted to the numbness than I was the drug. I
Mm,
really just wanted to not feel.
mhm,
And so I think if anyone is on a journey where they're feeling that way, or unheard, or unworthy, or their voice doesn't matter, or they were just put here to serve other people and please other people, um, I would say, first of all, that's a lie straight from the devil. No one was put here to please other people. But you know, you you have to start getting comfortable with the uncomfortable, and it is uncomfortable to sit with yourself. It is uncomfortable to sit and feel those feelings, but it's absolutely vital to figure out how you and that inner child can heal, and then eventually you have to walk away from her. You
mhm.
have to walk away from her because
Yes.
she's not in charge anymore, and
Mhm,
she can't make the decisions for you anymore, and you have to just say, honey, I've got this now. I've got
mhm,
this now. We're safe, we're worthy, we belong in this space. You have a voice, you can stand in your power. It's okay, I got this. Thanks for trying to protect me, but I got this.
mhm.
And so get in the rooms where people are talking about that.
Mhm.
Those are the rooms I want to be in now. And I
Yes.
want to bring other people with me on that journey. And I just, it's always been my passion to help people see their value and their worth. Um, Clearly, because I didn't have someone in my corner. I had my sister. Can't say that because I did have a lot of people,
Mm.
but it took, but I needed that in my
Mhm.
life. Yeah. And so
You needed
it's
to feel
just,
yourself in your corner. And
yeah.
the power of I'm in my corner and
Hmm.
with God,
Hmm. Hmm.
and, talking about not here to please people because I was waking up every morning looking at how can I please my husband. I thought that was
Yeah.
my purpose. And I know a lot of women that feel that way. Not
Yeah.
even as you're listening to this, you may be like, "Well, isn't it?" But truly, my purpose is to please God, and my
Yeah.
purpose is to think about how to do that today. And
Mm-hmm.
God made me for a huge purpose. And if I look at that and I take time to look at that vision that He's placed on my heart and given me of what's possible, and to get in those rooms, like we both are doing this, Jessica, to get in those rooms. That's how we met, and
Yep.
expand that vision, because it wasn't fed in childhood, but
Right.
we knew it was there. He showed it, the seed of that, to us, and then to say, okay, how can I nurture that? How can I grow that so that I
Mm-hmm.
can live into that purpose? And I love that you said you just have to walk away from the
Yeah.
inner child. In the neurological training I'm doing, inner matrix systems, Joey Klein is the author of that. And he really was harsh the way he put it, at one of the weekends I went to recently. He said, you have to kill that part of yourself. You have to kill it, because, and he's like, I know that sounds really harsh, because we're always trying to like nurture that inner child and heal the inner child and ask the inner child what deep needs support. And but there is a certain part where you just have to walk away, and or even just cut yourself off from that, because that inner child is not going to take you to vision. And
Right.
that inner child is always going to take you backwards to feeling unconfident and insecure and afraid. Whereas that isn't who God made us to be. He didn't give us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and a sound mind,
Yeah.
sanity. He created us to walk in sanity with Him. And when we get clarity for that, then it gives us permission, really,
Mm-hmm.
to make a break from that
Yeah.
old version of ourself that has maybe a lot of damage. And it's not wrong to work on that damage and heal it, but we have to retrain our brain and retrain our nervous system to walk in peace and walk in
Yeah.
joy and walk in like security, and even higher emotions like passion and elation and freedom.
Yes. Yeah.
Freedom. Freedom
Yep.
is the highest love-based emotion. And so
Mm-hmm.
to have that freedom, then we have to give ourselves permission. And sometimes those rooms is what gives us the permission. We need someone
Yes.
else stronger than us to say, you, like almost mentally, emotionally hold our hand and say, it's okay to walk away from that version,
Mm-hmm.
from that part. You're done. It's okay to put a
Mm-hmm.
period on
Yes.
sentence.
Mm-hmm. And one of the greatest things I think that recently, and you'll probably remember this too, that I heard was, we carry these things and we have like these anchors that are like buried in the sand, and we're dragging them along and dragging them along. And it can be, the abuse that you endured, some trauma, some just hurt from whoever, just or guilt, shame, whatever it is. And we're dragging them along and carrying them with us. And, and it just keeps us moving forward at such a slow pace.
Mm,
And it was Coot Blackson, and he said, what if you just let go? What if you just let go of them? They're going to be there. It's okay. You can come back to them if you need to. But what if just for right now, for just today, you let go?
mm,
What would that feel like? And that was so powerful to me, because
mm,
as you are working toward, finding your identity and finding yourself and letting go of all the limiting beliefs and the things that you might have felt in agreement with because of your environment, but that doesn't serve your future purpose or your best self, and you're trying to let go of those things. um, it's there's this, like I said, a push and a pull, and we're hanging on to things that we think we need to hang on to, or that we were told we're good or told we should do, whatever it might be. And really, if you just let go of them and just, they'll be there. If you want to pick them back up, go pick them back up. But I would bet to believe that you don't go back and pick them up.
mm, mm,
That once you give yourself the freedom to let go of it, it's like you're just going to run towards that next version of yourself.
mm.
And
Once you
And it's
feel freedom and what that
mhm,
release feels like and the
yeah.
freedom that comes after, it's like,
Mhm.
wow. Do you
Yeah.
know Skit Guys? Have you watched any of their
Who is
stuff?
it?
They're called the Skit Guys.
I'm not sure if I have.
They're on YouTube, and they're really good. They have a lot to do with recovery
Oh,
and
okay.
also our relationship with God. And they do skits. And one skit is it's these two guys, and the one guy's he's carrying these bags. And
Hmm.
so the skit is a visual of exactly what you were just describing. It's so good to just release it, really give it to God, because that baggage can become our identity, and it's
Mhm.
scary to let go. We don't even realize,
Yep.
like, oh wait, this is my identity, and I'm scared to let this go. What will be left of me if I wake up tomorrow and I don't pick up all this stuff that I carry
Yep.
every day?
Yeah.
Resentment, bitterness, the memory of, that what happened to me, what they did to me that was hurtful, and like put all this on and then walk into our day that way. What if I just get up the next morning and I just feel peace,
Yeah.
and I put
Yeah.
that on and I go into my day and I feel peace. Um,
Mhm.
and peace in emotions have frequency. I don't know if you talk about
Yes.
this in your wellness.
Energy is everything, and everything is energy.
Physiology.
Yes.
Yes. And this graphic I was looking at yesterday, um, peace was the next highest. It was 600, and there was only one above it that was 700 in frequency.
Hmm.
And I think it was elation. So, peace, what sometimes we feel like if we take the time in the morning to meditate and put on peace in our nervous system, that, well, wait, I woke up late, I just really don't have time for that, I'm kind of wasting time, let me just skip that today. And it's
Don't
like,
do it.
don't skip
Don't
it.
do it.
Don't take the time. If we
Yeah.
put ourselves and our self-care first, that's really the only place we can serve and make a difference from that day. It's
It's
not
so
all
true.
about the paycheck. It's not all about, the world tries to tell us what's most important, and
Mhm.
really taking care of ourselves and coming into these things and then
Yeah.
serving out of
Yeah.
that is what's
Yeah.
most important. So,
Yeah. Two things real quick, because I know we're running out of time. I
yes,
just want
any
to
final thoughts you want to
touch
share,
on.
Jessica?
There was two things I said that I learned that help with the nervous system, and I forgot to mention the second one, and you might know this, is when you feel yourself, like if you've just gone through a stressful situation, if you put your finger in your ear and just gently pull down, it will calm your central nervous system. And you just have some deep breaths. So you just put your finger, not all the way in, but just in the crook there. I'm going to take my AirPod out,
Yeah.
just right here, and you just pull down a little, and it calms you. And I've been practicing that. That's something recently I learned, and it really does work. And the
Wow.
other thing real quick I want to piggyback on is you mentioned the sanity, that
Mhm,
we are meant to have clarity of mind.
mhm,
And this is what I just want to leave you with is you're going to feel like you are going insane when you start to transform from who you were told you were to who God has called you to be. And
mhm.
there's going to be a level after level after level after level that you're going to go through in life, and you're going to have to trust, and the clarity will come, but it's going to come in pieces. And and it seems to me that every time you are ready to go to another level of self-discovery, that mental craziness, instability kind of comes in, and you're back and forth in your mind. um, Keep going. I just want to say
Keep
keep going, because
It's hard to
um,
change anything sometimes because of
it is.
that. It's like
Mhm.
we know that fear is like change is going to create that insanity feeling.
Yep.
And we keep going. Jessica's
Keep
telling us
going.
keep going.
Yep. Because there is light there is light, and it's just on the other side of that discomfort. So just push through it. push
Thank
through
you
it.
so much for
Trust your gut.
being here today.
Thank you.
This has been so rich, and I just really appreciate you being so vulnerable and open and sharing your story with us, Jessica.
Oh, thanks for having me. I just adore you. I love what you're doing here, and I hope that this blesses somebody today.
Thank you again. Thank you for listening to You Are Significant. Please leave us a review. Please leave comments, give us a like, and share this out. We appreciate you here on You Are Significant, and I cannot wait till next time to spend time with you.